What's up guys, welcome to another range day. Today we're going to be shooting my MP5k. Guys, if you enjoy the content that I'm making, then please make sure to like and subscribe and leave me a message down in the comments section. I hate asking, but it really does help the algorithm a lot, so I'd really appreciate it. And if you ring the bell icon, you should get notifications when new videos are released as well. Additionally, if you want more Chester's Hobbies content, you can follow me on Instagram where you can see what I'm working on and get previews of upcoming videos. And I'm also pretty active on Reddit if you'd like to follow along with the conversations there. Alright, well that's enough of that, so back to the gun of the day, my MP5k. Now, I've already talked pretty extensively about my love for the MP5 and the roller delay blowback system that it uses, so I'm not going to rehash everything here, but I'll include a link to my full-size MP5 video in the description if you're interested in checking that out as well. So the MP5k is nearly as iconic as the full-size MP5, being featured heavily in movies like The Matrix, Mission Impossible, and countless video games, so it definitely holds a major place in pop culture as well. Now the K or Kurz model that you see here has a shorter barrel and a shorter receiver, which makes the MP5k extremely compact and handy. It's definitely my personal favorite K-gun platform without a doubt. Now my example that I have here is a US-made clone from PTR Industries called the PTR 9KT. I purchased this gun back in 2019 and filed the Form 1 to turn it into an SBR, and it's been a total blast. I put well over 1,500 rounds to it so far with no malfunctions, and nearly half of that has been suppressed. One piece of debate or confusion online is whether or not to change the locking piece in an MP5k if you're going to be running it suppressed. Now I can only speak on my personal experience, but after the 200 round break-in period, I did swap in the 80-degree RCM locking piece, and it's run flawlessly for me, both unsuppressed with 115 and 124 grain supersonic ammunition, and also suppressed with 147 and 150 grain subsonic ammunition. Now it wasn't a clean fit originally, and it did require a little bit of filing to get it to fit, but it only took a few minutes and it's been running perfectly for me ever since. Some people say that if you swap out the locking piece, you won't be able to run the gun unsuppressed anymore, but that hasn't been my experience personally. So what's the purpose of swapping out the locking piece exactly? Well, the 80-degree locking piece was originally developed by H&K to slow down the reciprocation of the bolt so the gun wouldn't beat itself up as much with the extra back pressure of shooting suppressed. In my experience, it definitely does slow down the bolt, and as a result, the reciprocation is much more gentle, both suppressed and unsuppressed. A nice side effect of this is that it actually tames the traditionally punchier MP5k recoil and makes it much closer to its full-size MP5 brother. And don't get me wrong, the full-size MP5 is still softer shooting and easier to control under rapid fire, but the MP5k with the 80-degree locking piece is definitely still a wonderful experience. So other than swapping the locking piece, I haven't really done too much to my MP5k really. I installed the iconic MP5k vertical grip, which I absolutely love. Put my favorite Holosun 503 GU red dot on top, which does co-witness with the iron sights, but it's lower 1/3 or maybe even lower 1/5, but it does work. I really love the MP5's diopter sights, and I like being able to co-witness to reconfirm optic zero, so it works well enough for me. I know this welded on 1913 Picatinny rail is one of the sticking points for people when it comes to the PTRs, but for me it's perfectly functional, doesn't really bother me too much. Now originally I had a B&T folding stock on here, which worked great and looked excellent, but as I mentioned before, I use my support hand heavily when managing recoil under rapid fire, and having a longer extension with my support arm tends to give me better leverage on the gun. The issue with the MP5k is that it's so compact, it's pretty challenging to get the kind of leverage I typically prefer. So I recently swapped the B&T folding stock out for this UMP style stock, which looks very similar but actually adds about an inch to the length of pull, which has made the gun a lot more comfortable in dry fire, but I actually haven't had a chance to shoot it here at the range yet, so this will be my first time and I'm really excited to see how it feels. Another cool thing about this stock is that when it's folded, it lines up perfectly with the vertical grip, which is pretty neat and sort of ties everything together in my opinion. Other than that, the only other thing that I've added here is a rear QD sling attachment push pin from HK Parts, which works great with my Savvy Sniper sling. I'm completely obsessed with the classic look of the MP5k in this configuration. The cool factor is just through the roof for me, honestly. Now while we're out here today, there's one other thing that I wanted to do as well. I've been primarily using my Dead Air Wolfman in short configuration on the MP5k, which does work very well. It's extremely quiet and pretty light and handy. But just this week, I finally received my approved tack stamp for my brand new SilencerCo Omega 9K, which is a really iconic suppressor to use with the MP5k. So since I finally have the Omega 9K in hand after a long wait, I'm going to use this opportunity to compare it directly to the Wolfman in short configuration and see how they stack up against each other. Make sure to stay tuned to the end of the video for my thoughts on how that goes. So that's what we got going on today, guys. I absolutely love this gun and I'm really excited to shoot it, and I'm also psyched to finally test out this Omega 9K, so let's hit the range and have some fun. So guys, I want to give you an idea of what the MP5k sounds like, both unsuppressed with supersonic ammunition and then also suppressed with subsonic ammunition in both the Omega 9K and also the Wolfman in its short configuration. So I'm going to fire 2 shots unsuppressed, slow fire into the dirt, and then I'm going to attach the Omega 9K and fire 3 shots suppressed with subsonic ammo, again slow fire into the dirt, and then finally I'm going to attach the Wolfman in its short configuration and fire 3 more shots suppressed with subsonic ammunition, slow fire into the dirt. So let's start off with 2 shots unsuppressed, supersonic. Guys, I absolutely love the MP5k. It's so light and handy and just tons of fun to run. I shot 250 rounds today with absolutely no failures, and I would have shot a lot more if I brought more ammo. I was just having so much fun with this gun today. I have to say that I think the UMP stock with the extra length of pull made the gun way more controllable for me. It was really comfortable to shoot. I absolutely love the iconic MP5k vertical grip. It's extremely comfortable and ergonomic, and it looks awesome in my opinion. I really like the lower that PTR puts on these 9KTs. I generally don't like finger grooves, but I think these ones are pretty comfortable, and the SEF safety is really neat even if it doesn't really mean anything. With that 80-degree locking piece in here, the recoil impulse is incredibly mild. It barely feels like the gun is shooting at all. But in my experience, shorter platforms tend to have a little bit more muzzle movement, likely because I don't have as much leverage with my support hand. So while the UMP stock did improve that quite a bit, I still did notice that the gun was jumping around a little bit more than the full-size MP5. But it's still incredibly soft shooting and extremely controllable. And of course, an excellent suppressor host. Alright, now speaking of suppression, let's talk about the SilencerCo Omega 9K versus the Dead Air Wolfman. These are both fantastic suppressors, there's no doubt about that. They're both extremely durable and effective at reducing the sound signature at the muzzle, but they definitely do have some differences. Now in general, I do think that the Wolfman is more versatile and a better value because it's modular, being that it can be run both in short and long configurations where it will be significantly quieter. It can also be run with wipes, which makes it hilariously quiet. But even in its short configuration, the Wolfman is longer, fatter, and significantly heavier than the Omega 9K. Even though the Wolfman in its short configuration is still light and handy, it's definitely a noticeable weight at the end of the gun that mildly disrupts the natural weight distribution of the platform you're attaching it to. Where the Omega 9K really stands out is in its impressively tiny size and light weight, which makes it barely noticeable when attached to the end of the gun, and that's definitely a huge benefit. Now when I weighed these two suppressors as you see them here on my scale, the Wolfman came in at 14.2 ounces in the short configuration with the tri-lug adapter attached, and the Omega 9K came in at 9.3 ounces with the tri-lug adapter attached. So that's nearly a 5-ounce difference between the two, which may not sound like a lot, but when you put that 5 ounces at the very end of the gun, it definitely is noticeable. One of my favorite features of the Omega 9K is the ultra low profile tri-lug mount that SilencerCo uses. It's such a clean look with the suppressor getting right up against the sights on the MP5K without the eyesore of the excessively large tri-lug mount that Dead Air uses on the Wolfman. Now I realize that's a pretty small nitpick that really doesn't affect function much at all, but it's worth noting and it does add length to the Wolfman in both short and long configurations as well, whereas the low profile SilencerCo mount keeps the Omega 9K nice and tight on the platform. It ends up being about an inch shorter than the Wolfman in the short configuration overall. So that essentially covers it for the general function and ergonomic differences, but how do they sound? Now the sound performance of the Omega 9K is extremely impressive, especially for its size and weight. I'm actually kind of blown away at how good it sounds, honestly. I would say that the tone of the Omega 9K is just slightly sharper than the Wolfman in its short configuration, with the Wolfman having a slightly deeper tone overall. Now as for the sound at the ear for the shooter, you may have noticed that I still shoot with ear protection when shooting suppressed. And there's really two reasons for that. My hearing is really important to me, and under high volumes of fire, anything other than a 22 is really worth protecting your ears from. Now don't get me wrong, I've shot my 9mm PCC suppressed on several occasions without ear protection, but that actually brings me to the second reason. The steel that I have on my range is really loud, like significantly louder than the gunshots when shooting suppressed. So even though the guns themselves can be pretty comfortable in small doses, the steel is still really loud. So in the interest of ensuring the longevity of my hearing, I usually wear ear protection even when shooting suppressed, and that's definitely something I would recommend. But with all that being said, I do have to say that to my ear, the Wolfman is just a little bit quieter, even in its short configuration, and it's significantly quieter in its longer configuration. That said, when wearing ear protection, the difference is pretty mild and it can almost be hard to tell them apart when shooting at steel. Another thing that I noticed is that the Omega 9K has just a little bit more back pressure than the Wolfman. That can most likely be attributed to the smaller diameter of the can. It's not a huge difference, but I do think that makes the Wolfman just slightly softer shooting than the Omega 9K. Now honestly, we are kind of splitting hairs here, they're both fantastic. But in terms of versatility on PCCs, I do think that the Wolfman is a winner in that respect, especially if your primary goal is superior sound suppression or modularity. Now that said, if your goal is more to have something compact and barely noticeable on PCCs and also handguns, that's where I think I would actually recommend the Omega 9K instead. While the Omega 9K is fatter than most pistol cans, the Wolfman is even bigger in circumference, and using iron sights or even red dots on a pistol with a Wolfman and still being able to see your target is really not very practical. It's also distractingly front heavy on a handgun in my opinion. The Omega 9K on the other hand can still be shot with some suppressor height sights and red dot setups without having to look through the can. Most sights that I've tried just barely peek over the top of the suppressor body, and a center window red dot will almost always clear it. It's also one of the lightest 9mm cans out there, so it's barely noticeable on the gun, which makes a huge difference with the handgun shooting experience that can be really thrown off by being excessively front heavy at the muzzle. The Omega 9K is all about lightweight, minimal footprint, and balance, where the Wolfman is more of a suppression and modularity first type of design that can still be impressively handy and quiet in its short configuration. So in summary, I think they're both awesome cans, and I'm really glad that I have both, and while they do serve similar purposes, I do think that each of them can have a bit of an edge depending on your use case. Now as for the MP5K itself, in my opinion, it's the smoothest and softest shooting K-series platform that I've ever run. I absolutely love it, and I think it's completely iconic as well. It's just so cool, smooth, pleasant, and fun to run, especially suppressed. Now obviously the MP5K, much like its full-size MP5 brother, has plenty of quirks when it comes to the manual of arms. I talked about that at length in my previous MP5 video, so I'm not going to go into it too deeply here, but suffice to say that with no last round bolt hole open, and needing to lock the bolt back to remove the magazine, throw a new magazine in, and then slap the charging handle home, is definitely an antiquated design in today's PCC market. But I can't deny that it's extremely fun and visceral to run, and without a doubt, one of my favorites. Ergonomically, I think that something like the MPXK or even one of the CMMG Banshees with a 5-inch barrel would be an easier platform to pick up on if you've never shot an MP5 before, and would certainly be a lot simpler for serious use. But if you really want to go with an MP5, a little bit of training can go a long way. So while I did have a total blast with this gun today, I would say that there was one slight negative, but if I'm being honest, this is really just a me thing because I've been shooting a lot of really awesome triggers lately. An MP5 trigger really does leave a lot to be desired. It's a pretty long mushy pull with a soft break and then a relatively long muted reset. I actually do quite like the triggers in my PTRs, but if you're going from something like a Geisley or a Timney trigger and then trying to switch over to the MP5, it's a little bit alarming at first. It definitely slowed down some of my strings of fire a little bit, but towards the end of the day I was running it fast, no problem. So again, it's really more of a training issue than anything, but it's definitely worth noting that an MP5 trigger was primarily made for full auto fire, so shooting it in semi-auto really isn't the pinnacle of what PCCs can do. Now, if you're thinking about an MP5k for yourself, there's really a lot of options to choose from. There's of course the official H&K SP5k, but it's really quite expensive to a lot of the clones out there that offer a similar level of performance. Obviously, I'm sure the H&K variants are the best that you can possibly get, but to me, I do think there's a law of diminishing returns here, and I don't know if what you end up getting is really worth double the price of some of the other options. Now, in my personal experience, I've absolutely loved both of my PTRs. They each have close to 2,000 rounds with no failures at all so far. They've run absolutely beautifully for me, and they have a great warranty as well, so I've been really happy with that decision. Now, at the time of filming this video, if I was going to pick one today, I would probably go with the Century Arms MKE imports, because the prices they're currently offered for is crazy, but I don't know if that's actually going to last. Might be a temporary promotion, I'm not really sure. So that's going to be all for today, guys. We got a lot more videos coming up soon, including more PCCs, ARs, AKs, handguns, and shotguns. Remember to like and subscribe, ring the bell, stay tuned, and thanks for stopping by.